When Matthew Kane arrived at his dead brother's farm to honor a deathbed promise, he expected to fulfill his duty and disappear back into the wilderness. But taking care of his brother's widow and young son awakened something in the hardened drifter he never knew existed. As dangerous men from his outlaw past threatened to destroy the fragile family he's sworn to protect, Matt must choose between the safety of running away and fighting for a love he never believed he deserved. But what happens when the very act of staying puts the people he's grown to love in mortal danger? The thunder of hoofbeats pounded across the Wyoming plains as Matthew Kane pushed his horse harder than any decent man should. Blood soaked through his shirt where the bullet had grazed his ribs 3 days ago, and every jolt sent fire shooting through his body. Behind him, dust clouds marked where the bounty hunters had been gaining ground since dawn. Matt's horse stumbled on the rocky ground near Devil's Creek. The animal was done for. Foam covered its mouth, and its breathing came in harsh gasps. Matt slid from the saddle and grabbed his saddlebags, knowing he'd have to continue on foot. The August heat of 1,867 beat down on him like a hammer, and sweat mixed with blood on his torn shirt. "Easy, girl," he whispered to his horse, running a gentle hand along her neck. The mare had carried him faithfully for 2 years, through robberies and escapes, through the wild country between Colorado and Montana. Now, she was paying the price for his choices. A gunshot echoed across the valley. The bounty hunters were closer than he'd thought. Matt pulled his rifle from its scabbard and checked his ammunition. 4 bullets left. Not nearly enough if they cornered him. He started running toward the line of cottonwood trees that marked Sweetwater Creek. His boots slipped on loose stones, and his wounded side screamed with each step. The Wyoming Territory stretched endless in every direction, rolling hills covered in brown grass, with mountains rising purple in the distance. Beautiful country, but deadly if you were being hunted. Another shot, closer this time. Matt dove behind a boulder as a bullet whined overhead. He could see them now, 3 men on horseback, riding hard across the open ground. Professional hunters, not the usual drunks and drifters who sometimes tried to collect the bounty on his head. "Matthew Kane," one of them shouted, "give yourself up. Dead or alive, the price is the same to us." Matt laughed despite the pain in his side. Dead or alive had been his story for the past 5 years. Ever since that job in Nevada went wrong, he'd never meant to become an outlaw. But sometimes, life pushed a man in directions he never planned to go. He thought about the letter folded in his shirt pocket, the one that had reached him 2 weeks ago in a saloon in Cheyenne. His brother James was dead, killed by fever on a small farm north of Laramie. The letter was from the local preacher, saying James had left behind a wife and young son with no family to help them. "Your brother spoke of you often," the preacher had written. "He said if anything happened to him, you were the only one who could take care of his family. They need you, Mr. Kane." Matt had laughed when he first read it. Him? Take care of a family? He couldn't even take care of himself. But something about those words had stuck with him, like a burr under a saddle blanket. James had always been the good brother, the one who stayed home and worked their father's farm while Matt chased adventure and easy money across the territories. Now James was dead, and Matt was running from bounty hunters with a hole in his side and 4 bullets to his name. The sound of approaching horses grew louder. Matt peered around the boulder and saw them spreading out, trying to surround his position. These men knew their business. They'd probably tracked dozens of wanted men across this same country. He thought about Emma Kane, the woman James had married, according to the preacher's letter. Matt had never met her, but James had written about her sometimes in his rare letters. A strong woman, James had said, with kind eyes and a laugh that could brighten the darkest day. Now she was alone on that farm, with a 6-year-old boy, facing a world that ate up weak people without mercy. "We know you're hit, Kane," another hunter called out. "Make this easy on yourself." Matt checked his rifle again and took a deep breath. 4 bullets. 3 men. He'd faced worse odds before, but never when he was already wounded and on foot. Still, he had somewhere to be now, a promise to keep, even if James had never actually asked him to make it. The first hunter came around the left side of the boulder, his gun ready. Matt's shot took him in the shoulder, spinning him from his horse. The man hit the ground hard, but rolled behind a clump of sagebrush. Still dangerous. "One down," the wounded hunter yelled to his partners. "He's behind the big rock." Matt moved quickly to a new position as bullets chipped stone where he'd been hiding. His side was bleeding again, and black spots danced at the edges of his vision. He needed to end this fight soon, before he passed out. The second hunter made the mistake of charging straight at Matt's position, whooping like an Indian warrior. Matt's bullet caught him center mass, dropping him from his horse like a sack of grain. The man didn't get back up. 2 bullets left. 1 hunter still in the fight, plus the wounded one behind the sagebrush. "Jake's dead," the wounded man called out. "This ain't worth it, Tom. Kane's got the devil's own luck." "The hell with that," Tom shouted back. $500 says we take him." Matt could hear Tom's horse moving, trying to circle around behind him. These bounty hunters were good, but they'd made one mistake. They'd assumed he was just another desperate outlaw with nothing to lose. They didn't know about the letter in his pocket, or the promise he'd made to himself while reading it. Tom appeared between 2 boulders, his rifle aimed at Matt's hiding spot. But Matt had moved again, and his shot took Tom in the leg, dumping him on the rocky ground. The hunter's rifle went flying, landing 10 feet away. 1 bullet left. Matt stood up slowly, his rifle trained on the wounded Tom. "Your partner was right," Matt said. "This ain't worth it." Tom clutched his bleeding leg and glared up at Matt. "You think this is over? There's others looking for you, Kane. Word is, you got something that don't belong to you." Matt frowned. "What are you talking about?" "The gold from that Nevada job. Everybody knows you got away with it." Tom's voice was tight with pain, but his eyes held a different kind of hunger. 30,000 in gold coins, hidden somewhere between here and California. "I don't have any gold." Matt kept his rifle steady, but his mind was racing. The Nevada job had been 3 years ago, a payroll robbery that went bad when the guards put up more fight than expected. Matt had escaped, but empty-handed and with a price on his head. "Tell that to Marcus Hendricks," Tom said with a nasty grin. "He's the one put up the extra bounty money. Says you killed his brother in Nevada and stole his gold." The name hit Matt like a physical blow. Marcus Hendricks, he'd heard that name before, connected to businesses in Laramie and Cheyenne. If Hendricks was involved, this was about more than just bounty money. This was personal. "I never killed anybody's brother," Matt said. "Maybe not, but Hendricks thinks you did, and he's got enough money to keep sending hunters until one of them gets lucky." Matt looked around at the desolate landscape, thinking fast. He couldn't keep running forever, especially not with a wounded side and limited ammunition. But if he went to James's farm, he might bring this trouble to his brother's family. On the other hand, the farm was isolated, far from the main roads where bounty hunters usually traveled. It might be the perfect place to lay low until he could figure out how to deal with Marcus Hendricks. "Mount up and ride out," Matt told Tom. "Take your wounded partner with you. Next time I won't be so generous." Tom struggled to his feet, leaning heavily on his good leg. "This ain't over, Kane." "Maybe not, but it's over for today." Matt waited until the 2 surviving hunters had gathered their horses and ridden away toward the south. Then he shouldered his rifle and started walking north, following the creek toward Sweetwater Station and the railroad that would take him to his brother's farm. The sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky red and gold. Matt's side throbbed with each step, and his shirt was sticky with dried blood. He had maybe 10 miles to walk before he reached the station, and no guarantee that a train would be running tonight. But for the first time in years, he had a destination that meant something more than just another place to hide. James's family needed him, whether they knew it or not. And maybe after all these years of running, it was time to make a stand somewhere that mattered. The letter crinkled in his pocket as he walked, reminding him of words he'd memorized. "They need you, Mr. Kane." Maybe they did. And maybe, just maybe, he needed them too. Emma Kane stood at her kitchen window, watching the road that led from Sweetwater Station with the intensity of a hawk watching for prey. The morning sun cast long shadows across the yard, where 6-year-old Daniel played with his wooden soldiers, making explosion sounds as they fought invisible battles against the fence posts. 3 days had passed since she'd sent the letter to James's brother, though she had no idea if it would ever reach him. The preacher had warned her that Matthew Kane was a difficult man to find a drifter who moved from town to town, following railroad work and mining jobs across the territories. "Maybe it's better if he doesn't come," she murmured to herself, then immediately felt guilty for the thought. James had spoken of his brother often, always with a mixture of love and worry that only family could understand. Daniel's laughter drew her attention back to the yard. The boy had lined up his toy soldiers in perfect rows, just like his father used to arrange the tools in the barn. Everything in its place, everything organized and proper. James had been like that, methodical, careful, planning for every possibility, except the fever that had taken him so suddenly. "Mama!" Daniel called out. "Come see my army!" Emma smiled and stepped onto the porch, grateful for any distraction from her worries. The farm stretched around them in all directions, 160 acres of good land that James had claimed under the Homestead Act 5 years ago. The wheat fields were golden and ready for harvest. The corn stood tall in neat rows, and the vegetable garden provided more food than they could eat. It should have been paradise. But Emma couldn't shake the feeling that disaster was always just one mistake away. "Very impressive, General Daniel," she said, examining his military formation. "Are you planning to attack the barn?" "The barn is a fort," Daniel explained seriously, "and the chickens are enemy spies trying to steal our grain." Emma laughed, the first genuine laugh she'd managed since James's funeral. "Well, we can't let enemy spies succeed, can we?" "Papa said Uncle Matt fought in a real war," Daniel said, his young face suddenly thoughtful. "Do you think he'll teach me about being a soldier?" Emma's smile faded. James had mentioned that his brother had served briefly in the war between the states, though he'd never provided details. Like many things about Matthew Kane, it remained a mystery, wrapped in family stories and half-remembered conversations. "I don't know if your uncle will come at all," Emma said gently. "He has his own life, his own responsibilities." "But Papa said family always helps family," Daniel insisted. "That's what family means." Before Emma could answer, the sound of hoofbeats reached them from the direction of the main road. A single rider was approaching at a steady pace, not the urgent gallop of someone bringing bad news, but not the leisurely trot of a neighbor either. Emma shaded her eyes against the morning sun, trying to make out details of the approaching stranger. The rider was tall and lean, sitting his horse with the easy confidence of someone who'd spent most of his life in the saddle. As he drew closer, Emma could see that his clothes were dusty from travel, and his hat was pulled low over his face. "Daniel, go inside," she said quietly. "But Mama—" "Now, son, stay in the kitchen until I call for you." Daniel recognized the tone that meant business. He gathered his soldiers quickly and ran for the house, though Emma noticed he positioned himself at the kitchen window, where he could still watch the approaching rider. The stranger rode into the yard and stopped near the porch, his horse dancing nervously as if it sensed tension in the air. For a long moment, he simply sat there, studying the house and outbuildings, with the careful attention of someone evaluating a property or looking for potential threats. "Mrs. Kane?" His voice was deeper than James's had been, rougher around the edges like leather that had been weathered by hard use. "Yes." Emma kept her voice steady, though her heart was pounding. Something about this man's presence filled her with both hope and unease. He dismounted slowly, and Emma noticed the careful way he moved, as if favoring one side of his body. When he removed his hat, she saw the family resemblance immediately: the same dark hair as James, the same strong jaw, but with eyes that held secrets James had never carried. "I'm Matthew Kane, James's brother." Emma felt her knees go weak with relief. "Thank God. I wasn't sure the letter would find you. It found me." Matt's gaze traveled over the farm again, taking in details with professional thoroughness. I came as soon as I could. There was something in his tone that suggested the journey hadn't been easy. But Emma didn't pry. James had taught her that some questions were better left unasked, especially when dealing with men who'd lived hard lives. "The boy," Matt said. "Daniel. How is he?" "He's strong," Emma replied. "Like his father. But he misses James terribly. He doesn't understand why Papa won't come home." Matt nodded, his expression softening slightly. "Can I see him?" Emma hesitated. There was something about Matthew Kane that made her think of barely tamed wolves, beautiful and fascinating, but potentially dangerous. Still, James had trusted his brother enough to speak of him fondly, and right now she needed all the help she could get. "Daniel," she called toward the kitchen window, "come meet your Uncle Matt." The boy appeared on the porch so quickly that Emma suspected he'd been waiting right by the door. His eyes were wide with curiosity as he studied the tall stranger who shared his father's features but carried himself like a man ready for trouble. "You look like Papa," Daniel said with the brutal honesty of childhood. Matt knelt down to the boy's level, bringing himself closer to Daniel's height. "Your Papa was my younger brother. We grew up together on a farm not too different from this one." "Papa said you went away to seek your fortune," Daniel said. "Did you find it?" Matt was quiet for a moment, as if considering how to answer such an innocent question. "I found some things," he said finally. "Lost others. Your Papa was smarter than me. He knew the real treasure was right here." Emma felt her throat tighten at the unexpected gentleness in his voice. Whatever else Matthew Kane might be, he clearly cared about his nephew's feelings. "Are you going to stay and help us?" Daniel asked. "Mama says the harvest is coming, and it's too much work for just her and me." Matt glanced up at Emma, and she saw something flicker in his dark eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or uncertainty. "That's up to your mama, son. This is her home, her decision." The respectful response impressed Emma. She'd half expected him to simply take charge, the way many men did when they encountered a woman trying to manage on her own. "We could use the help," she admitted. "If you're willing to stay long enough for the harvest." "I'll stay as long as you need me," Matt said, rising to his full height. "James asked me to take care of you both, and I always keep my promises to family." Emma frowned. "James asked you? When?" Matt's face went carefully blank, and Emma realized she'd touched on something he hadn't meant to reveal. "Figure of speech," he said. "James wrote about you and the boy in his letters. I know he'd want me to help if I could." It wasn't quite the truth. Emma could sense that much, but she decided not to push. Whatever had brought Matthew Kane to their farm, she was grateful for his presence. The work ahead would be backbreaking, and she'd been dreading the thought of trying to manage it alone. "You can stay in the barn loft," she said. "It's not fancy, but it's clean and dry. That'll be fine. I'm used to rough accommodations." Matt looked around the yard again, and Emma noticed his hand drift unconsciously toward the gun at his hip. "You been having any trouble lately? Strangers nosing around, that sort of thing?" "No, nothing like that." "Why?" "Just cautious by nature." Matt's smile was easy, but Emma caught the quick glance he sent toward the road. Small farms like this, isolated as they are, sometimes attract the wrong kind of attention. Emma felt a chill despite the warm morning air. What kind of attention? Drifters looking for easy pickings, mostly. Men who think a woman alone might be an easy target. Matt's voice was casual, but there was steel underneath. "Don't worry about it. I'll keep an eye on things while I'm here." Daniel had been listening to this exchange with the wide-eyed attention children gave to adult conversations that seemed important but mysterious. "Uncle Matt," he said, "are you a cowboy?" Matt grinned, the first genuine smile Emma had seen from him. "Not exactly, son. More like a jack of all trades. I've done a little bit of everything." "Can you rope cattle?" "Some." "Can you shoot a gun?" Emma opened her mouth to interrupt, but Matt answered calmly. "I can. But shooting is serious business, not a game. A man only draws his weapon when he has to, and he better be sure he's in the right when he does." Daniel nodded solemnly, clearly filing away this piece of adult wisdom for future consideration. How about we get your Uncle Matt settled in? Emma suggested. Then he can help us figure out the harvest schedule. As they walked toward the barn, Emma found herself studying her brother-in-law from the corner of her eye. He moved with the fluid grace of someone accustomed to watching his surroundings, and she noticed how his gaze constantly swept their surroundings, cataloging details and potential threats. James had been gentle, predictable, safe. Matthew Kane was none of those things. But as she watched him listen patiently to Daniel's excited chatter about the farm and the animals and all the things a 6-year-old found fascinating, she began to think that maybe, just maybe, they were going to be all right. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that Matthew Kane had brought more than just helping hands to their isolated farm. There were secrets in his past, shadows that followed him like storm clouds on the horizon. Whatever those secrets were, Emma hoped they wouldn't bring danger to the peaceful life she and Daniel were trying to build from the ashes of their grief. The scream that tore through the pre-dawn darkness sent Matt bolting upright in the barn loft, his hand instinctively reaching for the pistol under his pillow. Below, in the farmyard, Emma's voice cut through the September air like a blade, raw with terror and desperation. Matt grabbed his boots and rifle, not bothering to fully dress as he vaulted down the ladder. Through the open barn door, he could see Emma in her nightgown on the porch. Daniel clutched against her chest, both of them staring at something in the vegetable garden. "What is it?" Matt called out, running across the yard with his rifle ready. "The scarecrow," Emma gasped, pointing with a shaking hand. "Look at the scarecrow." Matt's blood turned to ice water. What had been their friendly garden guardian the night before now wore a different face entirely. Someone had replaced the old burlap head with something that made Matt's stomach clench with recognition: a crude drawing of a skull with crossbones beneath it, painted in what looked suspiciously like dried blood. But it was the note pinned to the scarecrow's chest that made Matt curse under his breath. Even in the dim starlight, he could read the message scrawled in bold letters: "Give us the gold, or your new family pays." "Uncle Matt? What does it mean?" Daniel whispered, his small voice muffled against his mother's shoulder. Matt's mind raced as he studied the threatening display. Someone had been watching them, learning their routines, waiting for the right moment to send this message. They'd crept close enough to the house to change the scarecrow while the family slept, which meant they could have done much worse. "Emma, take Daniel inside and lock the doors," Matt said quietly. "Don't light any lamps." "Matthew, what gold are they talking about?" Emma's voice was steady now, but Matt could hear the steel underneath the voice of a woman who'd already lost too much and wouldn't go down without a fight. "It's complicated," Matt replied, his eyes scanning the surrounding fields for any sign of movement. "I'll explain everything once I know we're safe." "No." Emma stepped down from the porch, still holding Daniel, but with her chin raised defiantly. "You'll explain now. These people threatened my son. I deserve to know why." Matt looked at her, standing there in her white nightgown, her red hair loose around her shoulders, holding her boy like a shield between herself and the world's cruelty. She looked like an angel, but there was nothing soft about the determination in her green eyes. "3 years ago, I was involved in a robbery that went wrong," Matt said finally. "A payroll shipment in Nevada. People died, including a man named Robert Hendricks. His brother, Marcus, thinks I got away with 30,000 in gold coins." "Did you?" Emma's question was direct, unflinching. "No, I barely got away with my life." Matt pulled the threatening note from the scarecrow and crumpled it in his fist. "But Marcus Hendricks doesn't believe that. He's been sending bounty hunters after me ever since." Daniel raised his head from his mother's shoulder. "Are the bad men going to hurt us?" Matt knelt down in front of the boy, his voice gentle but serious. "Not if I have anything to say about it, son. But I need you to be brave and help take care of your mama while I figure out how to stop them." "Like a soldier?" "Exactly like a soldier." Emma carried Daniel back to the house, but she paused at the door. "How many men are we talking about?" "I don't know," Matt admitted. Could be 2. Could be 20. Depends on how much Marcus is willing to spend to get what he thinks I have. And if we gave them the gold they want? Can't give what I don't have. Matt checked his rifle again, counting cartridges by feel in the darkness. Besides, men like this, once they start taking from you, they don't stop. Give them gold today, they'll want the farm tomorrow. Emma nodded grimly. Then we fight. Emma, this is our home, Matthew. Daniel's legacy from his father. I won't be driven off by thugs and murderers. She shifted Daniel to her hip, and Matt noticed she was barefoot, her feet white against the dark porch boards. What do we do? The simple question hit Matt harder than any physical blow. When had someone last asked him, what do we do, instead of just expecting him to disappear when trouble arrived? When had anyone trusted him enough to stand and fight beside him? First, we make the house secure, Matt said. Board up the windows, move furniture against the doors. Then, we wait and see what they try next. Won't they just burn us out? Matt shook his head. Fire's too obvious. Brings attention from neighboring farms, maybe even law from town. They want this to look like an accident, or like we just disappeared. As they worked through the early morning hours, fortifying their home like a frontier fort, Matt found himself stealing glances at Emma. She moved with quiet efficiency, following his instructions without question, but adding her own practical suggestions. When Daniel grew tired, she settled him in the root cellar with his toys and a pile of blankets, turning the safest room in the house into an adventure rather than a hiding place. Tell me about James, Matt said as they positioned a heavy dresser against the front window. What kind of man was he really? Emma paused in her work, her hands resting on the smooth wood surface. Patient, kind. He never raised his voice, even when the crops failed 2 years running. He used to read to Daniel every night, the same fairy tales over and over, because Daniel loved hearing about brave knights and beautiful princesses. Sounds like a good father. He was, but he was also, Emma struggled for words. Safe, predictable. I married him because I needed security, and he married me because he needed help with the farm. We were fond of each other, but passion, she shrugged. That was something that happened to other people. Matt stopped working and looked at her directly. Why are you telling me this? Because you're risking your life for people you barely know, and I want you to understand what you're fighting for. Emma met his gaze without flinching. This isn't some grand romance, Matthew. This is just a woman and a boy trying to make a life on a hard piece of ground. If you're looking for something more exciting, I'm not, Matt interrupted. I've had enough excitement to last 3 lifetimes. This. He gestured around the simple farmhouse, at the evidence of their domestic preparations. This is the first place I've been in years where I felt like I belonged. The admission surprised them both. Emma studied his face in the lamplight, seeing past the rough exterior to something vulnerable underneath. Even with dangerous men hunting you? Even knowing your presence puts us at risk? Maybe because of it, Matt said honestly. For the first time in my life, I'm not just running towards something or away from something. I'm standing my ground for people who matter. A sound outside the soft nicker of a horse brought them both to instant alertness. Matt blew out the lamp and moved to the window, peering through a gap in the boards. 3 riders sat their horses at the edge of the yard, just visible in the gray pre-dawn light. They made no attempt to hide themselves, which somehow made them more threatening than if they'd skulked in the shadows. Kane, one of them called out. We know you're in there. Time to talk business. Matt recognized the voice Charlie Brennan, a man he'd ridden with during his outlaw days. Charlie was smart, ruthless, and completely without conscience. If Marcus Hendricks had hired him, this was worse than Matt had feared. What do you want, Charlie? Matt called back through the boarded window. Same thing I've always wanted from you, cooperation. Marcus Hendricks is offering you a deal. Give him what's his, and he'll let you and your new family walk away clean. I told you before, I don't have his gold. Charlie laughed, the sound carrying clearly across the yard. Maybe not. But you know where it is, don't you? That job in Nevada, when everything went sideways, somebody walked away with that payroll. If it wasn't you, you know who it was. Matt's jaw clenched. Charlie was fishing, but he was also partially right. Matt did know what had happened to the gold from the Nevada robbery, and it wasn't a secret he could share without destroying innocent lives. I got nothing to tell you, Charlie. That's disappointing. Charlie's voice hardened. See, Marcus is getting impatient. He's already paid out good money for information on where you've been hiding, and he wants results. Emma appeared at Matt's shoulder, close enough that he could smell the lavender soap she used in her hair. Who told them we were here? She whispered. Matt's mind raced through possibilities. Only a few people in Sweetwater Station knew he'd come to the farm, the station master, maybe a clerk at the general store, or the preacher. He breathed. Someone got to Reverend Morrison. Emma's face went pale. If the preacher had talked willingly or otherwise, then these men knew everything about the farm, about Emma and Daniel, about their daily routines and vulnerabilities. Kane. Charlie called again. I'm going to count to 10. Then my boys and I are coming in for a social visit. Your lady friend and the boy, well, accidents happen during social visits. Matt checked his rifle one final time. 6 shots. 3 men outside. Maybe more he couldn't see. Not good odds. Especially with Emma and Daniel to protect. There's another way, Emma said quietly. What do you mean? The storm cellar. It connects to the old well shaft. Daniel and I could slip out through there, circle around behind them, while you keep them busy from the front. Matt stared at her. Emma, no. It's too dangerous. More dangerous than sitting here waiting for them to burn us out? Emma's voice was calm, reasonable, but her hands were shaking slightly. I know this land better than they do. I can get Daniel to safety at the Morrison place, bring back help. And if they catch you? Emma's smile was grim but determined. Then you'll hear the screaming and know to come running. Outside, Charlie had started counting. 5, 6, 7. Matt made his decision. Go. Take Daniel and get out of here. I'll hold them off as long as I can. Emma nodded and started toward the cellar, then stopped and turned back. Before Matt could react, she rose on her toes and kissed him quick, fierce, desperate. Don't you dare die on me, Matthew Kane, she whispered against his lips. I just found you. Then she was gone, disappearing into the cellar with Daniel while Charlie finished his count outside. Matt positioned himself at the front window, his rifle ready, and waited for the storm to break. The first shot shattered the morning air like thunder, and the real fight began. Marcus Hendricks arrived in Sweetwater Station on the noon train, stepping onto the platform with the careful precision of a man who controlled every detail of his environment. Unlike the rough cowboys and railroad workers who populated the frontier town, Hendricks wore an expensive Eastern suit and carried himself with the confidence of someone accustomed to having his orders followed without question. The station master, a nervous man named Peterson, hurried over with the deference small-town officials showed to obviously wealthy visitors. Mr. Hendricks, sir, your telegram said you'd be arriving today. I have your horse ready, just as you requested. Good. Hendricks accepted the reins of a fine black gelding, his pale eyes scanning the dusty street with calculating interest. Tell me, Peterson, what do you know about the Kane farm? Peterson shifted uncomfortably. Not much, sir. Quiet folks. Keep to themselves mostly. James Kane died of fever a few months back, left behind a widow and young boy. And recently? Any unusual activity? Well, Peterson glanced around nervously. There was some shooting this morning, early, before sunrise. Folks in town heard it, but nobody wanted to go investigate. You know how it is with isolated farms. Sometimes there's trouble with wild animals or rustlers. Hendricks nodded, though his expression suggested he knew exactly what kind of trouble had visited the Kane farm that morning. I'll need directions. As Peterson drew a rough map in the dirt, explaining the route to the farm, Hendricks listened with half his attention. The other half was focused on a plan he'd been developing for 3 years, ever since his brother Robert had died in that botched robbery in Nevada. Robert had been the dreamer in the family, always chasing get-rich-quick schemes, while Marcus built their business empire through careful planning and ruthless execution. When Robert had invested their father's inheritance in what he claimed was a sure-thing silver mine, Marcus had been furious but supportive. Family was family, after all. Then Robert had gotten involved with outlaws and treasure hunters, convinced that he could recover the family's lost fortune through one big score. The Nevada payroll job was supposed to be simple: rob the train, split the gold, disappear into the territories until the heat died down. Instead, Robert had ended up dead, and 30,000 in gold coins had vanished, along with the only survivor of the robbery, Matthew Kane. For 3 years, Marcus had hired bounty hunters and private investigators, following every lead and rumor across the Western territories. Most of the trail had gone cold, but Marcus was nothing if not persistent. When his sources finally located Kane at this isolated farm, Marcus had seen an opportunity for something better than simple revenge. He wanted his money back, of course, but more than that, he wanted Kane to suffer the way Marcus had suffered, watching helplessly as everything important was taken away piece by piece. The ride to the Kane farm took 40 minutes across rolling prairie land that would have been beautiful under different circumstances. Marcus had grown up in cities, but he could appreciate the stark grandeur of the Wyoming landscape: endless sky, golden grasslands, mountains purple in the distance. He could also appreciate the isolation. Whatever happened at the Kane farm today, it would be hours before anyone in town knew about it. The first sign of trouble was the smell of smoke drifting on the afternoon breeze. As Marcus topped a low ridge, he could see the farm spread out below him: neat fields, a small house, various outbuildings. But rising from behind the barn was a thin column of black smoke that spoke of things burning that weren't supposed to burn. Marcus rode down the slope at a careful pace, his hand resting on the butt of the pistol inside his jacket. He'd hired Charlie Brennan specifically because of the man's reputation for getting results. But Charlie also had a tendency toward unnecessary violence that Marcus preferred to personally supervise. The farmyard was eerily quiet as Marcus approached. No chickens scratching in the dirt, no sounds from the barn or house. Even the wind seemed muted, as if the very air was holding its breath. He found Charlie Brennan sitting on the front porch steps, methodically cleaning blood from his knuckles with a dirty bandana. 2 other men, Marcus recognized them as the Sullivan brothers. Hired guns from Colorado were searching through the barn and outbuildings. "Where is he?" Marcus asked without dismounting. Charlie looked up with the lazy smile of a cat who'd been playing with wounded mice. "Gone. Him and the woman and kid. Slipped out during the excitement this morning." "Gone where?" "That's what we're trying to figure out." Charlie stood and stretched, wincing slightly as the movement pulled at what looked like a bullet crease along his ribs. "Kane's smarter than I gave him credit for. Had the house prepared like a fort, fought us off for near an hour, before we realized they'd rabbited out the back." Marcus's jaw tightened. "I specifically told you I wanted them taken alive. And I tried. But Kane wasn't in a cooperative mood." Charlie gestured toward a dark stain on the porch boards. "That's from Tom Sullivan. Kane put a bullet through his shoulder before we even got close to the house." One of the Sullivan brothers emerged from the barn, shaking his head. "Nothing in there but farming tools and some old tack. If Kane had gold hidden here, he moved it already." Marcus dismounted and walked slowly around the farmyard, his businessman's mind cataloging details. The house showed obvious signs of hasty fortification boards nailed over windows, furniture moved against doors. But there were also signs of normal family life: a child's toy soldiers scattered near the garden, women's laundry hanging on a line, a half-finished quilt on the porch swing. It was the domestic details that bothered Marcus most. His intelligence had painted Matthew Kane as a hardened criminal, a man who lived by violence and cared nothing for innocent lives. But the evidence here suggested something different: a man who'd been willing to make a stand to protect a family that wasn't even his by blood. "What about the preacher?" Marcus asked. "Morrison. Did he give you useful information? Charlie's smile turned ugly. Oh yes. Very cooperative once we explained the situation. Told us all about how Kane showed up here, claiming to be the dead brother. How he'd been helping with the farm work. Playing father to the boy, claiming to be the dead brother? That's right. Turns out our Matthew Kane has been living here under false pretenses, pretending to be James Kane's brother. Makes you wonder what other lies he's been telling. Marcus frowned. His research had been thorough. Matthew Kane was definitely James Kane's older brother, a fact confirmed by military records and family documents. If Charlie had gotten different information from the preacher, either Morrison was lying or Charlie had misunderstood something important. Where would they run? Marcus asked. Kane knows this territory. He won't head for any obvious hiding places. Could be anywhere within 50 miles by now, Charlie admitted. But I got an idea about how to flush them out. Marcus waited, though something in Charlie's tone made him uneasy. See, Kane's got himself attached to that woman and kid. Means he can't just disappear into the wilderness like he used to. He's got to keep them safe, which limits his options. Charlie's grin was pure predator. So we make it clear that nowhere is safe. We visit every farm, every settlement within riding distance. Let folks know that helping Matthew Kane is bad for their health. You're talking about terrorizing innocent people. I'm talking about results. Charlie's voice hardened. You want your gold back or not, Hendricks? Because playing by gentlemen's rules ain't going to work with a man like Kane. Marcus stared out across the peaceful farmland, weighing his options. He'd come this far, invested too much time and money to turn back now. But Charlie's methods would draw attention from territorial authorities, maybe even federal marshals. That kind of heat could destroy everything Marcus had built. On the other hand, if Matthew Kane really had stolen $30,000 in gold, that money could fund Marcus's expansion plans for years to come. It could buy him respect, political connections, maybe even a seat in the territorial legislature when Wyoming eventually became a state. There's another way, Marcus said slowly. Kane isn't just hiding anymore, he's protecting people he cares about. That makes him predictable. How do you figure? A man alone can disappear forever in country like this. But a man with a woman and child? He needs supplies, shelter, medical care if someone gets hurt. Eventually, he'll have to come to town. Marcus turned back toward his horse, his mind already working through the logistics. We don't chase them through the wilderness. We wait. Set up in Sweetwater Station, let it be known that we're looking for information. Offer rewards for sightings. Make it profitable for people to cooperate. What if they don't come to town? What if they just keep running? Marcus smiled, and there was something in the expression that made Charlie take an unconscious step backward. Then we make sure they have no choice. Burn them out of every hiding place, cut off every source of help, until the only safe haven left is the one we control. As Marcus rode back towards Sweetwater Station, he reflected on how much simpler this had seemed when it was just about recovering stolen gold. Now it had become something more personal, a test of wills between two men who'd both lost too much to compromise. Behind him, smoke continued to rise from the Kane farm, marking the end of one chapter and the beginning of something darker. Marcus Hendricks was a patient man, but his patience was wearing thin. It was time to finish what his brother had started 3 years ago in Nevada. Sheriff Tom Patterson had been lawman in Sweetwater Station for 12 years, and he'd never seen the town so on edge as when Marcus Hendricks rolled into his office. That October morning, with a badge from the territorial marshal and a story that made Patterson's coffee turn cold in his cup. You're telling me Matthew Kane is wanted for murder and robbery across 3 territories? Patterson leaned back in his wooden chair, studying the well-dressed stranger who claimed to represent law and order. Hendricks placed a stack of official-looking papers on the desk, with the practiced ease of a man accustomed to getting his way through paperwork. Multiple counts: bank robbery in Colorado, stagecoach holdups in Montana, and the murder of my brother Robert during a payroll theft in Nevada 3 years ago. Patterson picked up one of the wanted posters, examining the crude drawing that was supposed to represent Matthew Kane. It could have been any lean, dark-haired man between 25 and 40. This doesn't look much like the Kane I met. You've seen him? Briefly. Came through town a few weeks ago. Asked directions to his brother's farm. Seemed like a decent enough fellow, though he had the look of a man who'd seen some hard country. Hendricks leaned forward in his chair, his pale eyes intense. Sheriff, this man is extremely dangerous. He's been hiding at the Kane farm under false pretenses, using his dead brother's widow and child as cover for his criminal activities. Something about Hendricks's tone bothered Patterson, though he couldn't put his finger on exactly what. The man was too smooth, too prepared with his answers. In Patterson's experience, legitimate lawmen usually arrived dusty and tired, not perfectly groomed, and carrying leather briefcases. What makes you think Kane's still in the area? Patterson asked. 3 days ago, there was a gunfight at the Kane farm. My associates attempted to serve a warrant, and Kane opened fire without warning. He escaped with the woman and child, but they can't have gone far. Patterson's frown deepened. Your associates? Who exactly are we talking about? Authorized bounty hunters, working under territorial warrant. Hendricks pulled another document from his briefcase. Everything perfectly legal, I assure you. The sheriff studied the warrant, noting the official seals and signatures. It looked legitimate, but something still felt wrong about the whole situation. Patterson had learned to trust his instincts over the years. They'd kept him alive through range wars and mining camp riots. I'll need to verify these documents with the territorial capital, Patterson said carefully. Hendricks's smile was understanding but firm. Of course, though I should mention that time is of the essence. Kane is known to be violent when cornered, and he's currently traveling with innocent hostages. The longer he remains free, the greater the danger to Mrs. Kane and her son. Before Patterson could respond, the office door burst open and Reverend Morrison stumbled in, his usually neat appearance disheveled and his left eye blackened with a fresh bruise. Sheriff, Morrison gasped, clutching the doorframe for support. Thank God you're here. I've been writing all night to. The preacher stopped abruptly when he saw Marcus Hendricks sitting calmly in the visitor's chair. The color drained from Morrison's face, and he took an involuntary step backward. Reverend Morrison, Hendricks said pleasantly, how nice to see you again. I trust your conscience. Is feeling better? Patterson's hand moved instinctively toward his gun. What's going on here? Morrison looked between the two men, terror and moral outrage warring in his expression. Sheriff, this man and his hired guns came to my house 3 nights ago. They threatened my wife and children, forced me to tell them everything I knew about the Kane family. That's a serious accusation, Patterson said, his voice deadly quiet. Hendricks remained perfectly calm. The good reverend is understandably upset. Sometimes, the pursuit of justice requires uncomfortable conversations with potential witnesses. They burned down the Kane farmhouse. Morrison burst out. Shot at Matthew Kane and his family like they were wild animals. And now they're spreading word around the territory that anyone who helps the Kanes will face the same treatment. Patterson stood up slowly, his chair scraping against the wooden floor. 12 years of keeping peace in a frontier town had taught him to recognize predators when he saw them, regardless of how expensive their suits were. Mr. Hendricks, Patterson said carefully, I think we need to have a longer conversation about your methods and your authority here. Hendricks smiled, but the expression didn't reach his eyes. I'm afraid that won't be possible, Sheriff. You see, I've already sent word to the territorial governor about your cooperation with known criminals. It seems you were seen talking with Matthew Kane, giving him directions, perhaps even providing assistance. The threat hung in the air like smoke from a distant fire. Patterson felt his jaw clench as he realized he was dealing with something far more dangerous than a simple manhunt. This was a man with enough money and connections to destroy careers and lives from hundreds of miles away. Get out of my office, Patterson said quietly. I beg your pardon? You heard me. Take your papers, your threats, and your hired guns, and get out of my town. Hendricks stood with unhurried grace, gathering his documents with the same precision he'd displayed in presenting them. "That's unfortunate, Sheriff. I had hoped we could work together on this." "We could have, if you'd come here honest, asking for help, finding a dangerous criminal. But you didn't. You came here with lies and intimidation, trying to turn me into your personal attack dog." Hendricks paused at the door, his hand resting on the brass handle. "You're making a mistake, Patterson. I have powerful friends in the territorial government. Cross me, and you'll find yourself without a badge or a pension." Patterson's smile was grim but determined. "Maybe so, but I'll still be able to look at myself in the mirror every morning." After Hendricks left, Reverend Morrison collapsed into the chair, his hands shaking as he accepted the cup of coffee Patterson offered. "Tell me everything," Patterson said. Morrison's story came out in fits and starts, interrupted by moments when emotion overcame his ability to speak. Hendricks and his men had arrived at the parsonage after midnight, presenting themselves as law officers pursuing a dangerous fugitive. When Morrison had hesitated to provide information about the Kane family, they'd made it clear that his wife and children would suffer if he didn't cooperate. "They knew things," Morrison whispered. "Personal things about Emma and Daniel, about James's death, about Matthew's arrival at the farm. Someone had been watching them for weeks, gathering information." "What did you tell them?" "Everything." Morrison's voice broke. "God help me, I told them everything. About the letter I'd sent to Matthew, about how he'd been helping with the farm, about Emma and Daniel's daily routines. I was so scared for my family." Patterson placed a reassuring hand on the preacher's shoulder. "You did what you had to do to protect your wife and children. No one blames you for that. But now Emma and Daniel are out there somewhere, running for their lives because of what I told those monsters." Morrison looked up at Patterson with desperate eyes. "Sheriff, we have to help them. Matthew Kane may not be a saint, but he's trying to protect innocent people. That has to count for something." Patterson nodded slowly. "It counts for a lot. Question is, where would they go? Kane knows this territory, but he's got a woman and child to think about now. That limits his options." "The old mining camps," Morrison said suddenly. "Up in the foothills. James used to talk about exploring them when he was younger. Some of them still have buildings, water sources. A man could hide there for weeks if he knew what he was doing." Patterson moved to the large map on his office wall, studying the terrain north of Sweetwater Station. The foothills were honeycombed with abandoned mines and ghost towns, most of them forgotten since the Easy Gold had played out 5 years earlier. "That's a lot of country to search," Patterson mused. "And if Hendricks is spreading his people around the territory like you say, Kane can't stay hidden forever. What are you thinking?" Patterson turned from the map, his decision made. "I'm thinking it's time for me to take a hunting trip up in the mountains. Might run into some interesting folks while I'm up there." Morrison's eyes widened. "Sheriff, if Hendricks finds out you're helping them, then I guess I better make sure he doesn't find out." Patterson checked his rifle and began packing supplies into his saddlebags. "Reverend, can you get word to your wife to pack up and visit her sister in Cheyenne? Just until this blows over? You think they'll come back for us?" Patterson's expression was grim. Men like Hendricks don't forgive, and they don't forget. But they also don't like witnesses to their methods. Better safe than sorry. As Patterson prepared to leave town, he reflected on how much his quiet life had changed in the span of a single morning conversation. This morning he'd been a small-town sheriff, dealing with the usual problems of frontier, law enforcement, drunk cowboys, claim disputes, the occasional horse thief. Now he was preparing to defy territorial authorities and risk his career to protect people he barely knew, simply because it was the right thing to do. 12 years of wearing a badge had taught him many things, but the most important lesson was this: sometimes the law and justice weren't the same thing. When that happened, a man had to choose which one mattered more. Patterson chose justice. As he rode north toward the foothills, Patterson couldn't shake the feeling that the next few days would determine not just the fate of the Kane family, but the kind of man he was going to be for the rest of his life. Behind him, Sweetwater Station continued its daily routine, unaware that its sheriff had just declared war on one of the most dangerous men in the Wyoming Territory. Hidden in the shadow of Devil's Peak, the abandoned silver mine called Lucky Strike had once housed 300 miners and their families during the boom years of the early 1860s. Now only ghosts and memories remained among the weathered buildings that clung to the mountainside like barnacles on a ship's hull. Emma Kane crouched beside a broken window in what had been the mine superintendent's office, watching the valley below through a pair of field glasses Matt had found in the ruin. For 5 days they'd been living like hunted animals, moving from one abandoned camp to another, always staying ahead of the search parties that seemed to multiply like wolves in winter. "See anything?" Matt asked quietly from his position near the door, his rifle ready. "2 riders on the south ridge," Emma replied, her voice steady despite the exhaustion she felt in every bone. "They're not pushing hard, just looking." Daniel sat in the corner, playing quietly with his wooden soldiers. The boy had adapted to their fugitive existence with the resilience of childhood, turning their desperate flight into an adventure game, where they were brave explorers hiding from imaginary dragons. But Emma could see the strain in his young face, the way he startled at unexpected sounds, the circles under his eyes from too many nights sleeping on hard ground. Her son needed stability, safety, a chance to be a normal 6-year-old again. "How much food do we have left?" Matt asked, though Emma could tell from his tone that he already knew the answer. "Maybe 2 days, if we're careful." Emma lowered the field glasses and rubbed her tired eyes. The jerky's almost gone, and we're down to the last of the hardtack. Matt nodded grimly. They'd been living off supplies scavenged from abandoned camps and what little they'd been able to carry during their escape from the farm. It wasn't enough to sustain them much longer, especially with winter approaching and Daniel needing more nutrition than dried meat and stale biscuits could provide. "We need to get to town," Matt said. "Find Sheriff Patterson. See if we can get some help sorting this out." "And if Patterson's been bought off like everyone else?" Matt was quiet for a moment, considering possibilities neither of them wanted to face. "Then we keep running. Head for California maybe. Or up to Canada. Start over somewhere Hendricks can't find us." Emma studied his profile in the dim light, filtering through broken boards. Over the past week, she'd watched Matthew Kane transform from a man running from his past into someone willing to sacrifice everything for people who weren't even his blood family. The change had been gradual but unmistakable, the way he automatically positioned himself between her and danger. The gentle patience he showed with Daniel's fears and questions, the careful way he rationed their food to make sure she and the boy ate first. "Matthew," she said softly, "what really happened in Nevada 3 years ago?" Matt's hands stilled on his rifle. "I told you. You told me the official version. Now I want the truth." Emma set down the field glasses and faced him directly. "We're living like outlaws because of something that happened before you ever met us. I deserve to know the whole story." Matt was quiet for so long that Emma thought he wasn't going to answer. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of secrets that had been eating at him for years. "There were 5 of us on that job," he began. "Me, Charlie Brennan, Robert Hendricks, and 2 brothers named Sullivan. Robert had convinced us it was easy money. Union Pacific payroll train. Lightly guarded. Perfect spot for a holdup." Emma waited, sensing that interruptions would only make it harder for him to continue. "Everything went wrong from the start. The train was carrying double guards, and they were ready for us. Someone had talked, given them warning. The firefight lasted maybe 10 minutes, but when the smoke cleared, Robert Hendricks was dead, and one of the Sullivan brothers was bleeding out in the dirt. What about the gold?" Matt's laugh was bitter. There wasn't any gold. The whole thing was a setup. The payroll train was a decoy, carrying nothing but railroad company guards and a few bags of rocks. We'd been played from the beginning. Emma frowned. "Then why does Marcus Hendricks think you stole $30,000? "Because I let him think that." Matt finally looked at her, his dark eyes full of regret. "After the job went bad, I found out who had betrayed us. Robert Hendricks himself, had made a deal with the railroad. He was going to turn us in for the reward money after we robbed the train. His own partners? Robert was desperate. His brother Marcus had cut him off financially, told him he was done bailing him out of failed schemes. Robert figured if he could collect the bounty on a gang of train robbers, Marcus would have to respect him again. Emma felt pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. So, you let Marcus believe his brother died, trying to stop the robbery, instead of learning that Robert had planned to betray everyone. Robert was already dead. Telling Marcus the truth wouldn't bring him back, but it would destroy what little respect Marcus had for his brother's memory. Matt set his rifle aside and rubbed his face with both hands. I figured it was kinder to let Marcus think Robert died a hero instead of a betrayer. And the gold that never existed? Marcus invented that himself. He needed to believe there was a reason for Robert's death beyond stupidity and bad judgment. 30,000 in stolen gold gave him something to focus his anger on, something to hunt for. Emma stared at Matt in amazement. You've been running from bounty hunters for 3 years to protect a dead man's reputation? Seemed like the right thing to do at the time, Matt said quietly. Now I'm not so sure. My trying to be noble has put you and Daniel in danger. Before Emma could respond, Daniel's small voice cut through their conversation. Mama, there's a man coming up the hill. Both adults rushed to the window, Matt raising his rifle while Emma grabbed the field glasses. A single rider was making his way carefully up the rocky trail toward the mine buildings, his hands clearly visible and empty of weapons. It's Sheriff Patterson, Emma said with relief. You sure? Matt asked, not lowering his rifle. I'm sure. He's alone, and he's got a white cloth tied to his saddle horn. Matt remained suspicious. Could be a trap. Hendricks might have gotten to him. Only one way to find out, Emma said, moving toward the door. Emma, wait. But she was already outside, walking down the slope toward the approaching rider, with her chin raised and her shoulders squared. Matt cursed under his breath and followed, keeping his rifle ready but not obviously threatening. Patterson reined in his horse 20 feet away, his weathered face serious but not hostile. Mrs. Kane, Mr. Kane, I think it's time we had a conversation. Depends on what kind of conversation you're looking for, Matt replied carefully. Patterson dismounted slowly, making no sudden movements. The kind where I tell you that Marcus Hendricks has been spreading lies about you all over the territory, and you tell me what really happened in Nevada 3 years ago. Emma felt a surge of hope. You don't believe his story? Let's just say I've developed some serious doubts about Mr. Hendricks and his methods. Patterson's smile was grim, especially after he threatened to have me removed from office for not cooperating with his manhunt. Matt lowered his rifle slightly. What do you want to know? Everything. The truth? This time. Because right now, Hendricks has half the territory thinking you're a killer, and the other half too scared to help you, even if they wanted to. Over the next hour, sitting in the ruins of the mining camp while Daniel played nearby, Matt told Sheriff Patterson the full story of the Nevada robbery. Emma watched Patterson's face as the tale unfolded, seeing surprise, understanding, and finally a grim determination that gave her hope. So there never was any stolen gold, Patterson said when Matt finished. Never was. Just a dead man's reputation and his brother's need for revenge. Patterson was quiet for a moment, digesting the implications. You realize what this means? If I help you prove the truth, Marcus Hendricks becomes just another man who's been hunting innocent people for 3 years. His reputation, his business connections, maybe even his freedom, all of it disappears. Are you willing to take that risk? Emma asked. Patterson looked at Daniel, who had wandered over to listen to the adult conversation with the intense curiosity of childhood. The boy's clothes were dirty from days of rough living. His face was thinner than it should be, but his eyes still held trust in the adults who were supposed to protect him. Mrs. Kane, Patterson said finally, I became a lawman to protect people like you and your son from people like Marcus Hendricks. If I'm not willing to risk my badge for that, then I don't deserve to wear it. As the three adults made plans for ending the manhunt and exposing Hendrix's lies, none of them noticed the lone figure watching them through a spyglass from a ridge half a mile away. Charlie Brennan had found them at last. Charlie Brennan's bullet shattered the morning silence. Just as Sheriff Patterson was reaching for his coffee cup, the shot echoing off the canyon walls like thunder. Patterson dove sideways, his cup exploding in a shower of hot liquid and ceramic shards as he rolled behind a fallen log. "Matt Cain!" Charlie's voice carried across the rocky terrain, amplified by the natural acoustics of the mining camp. "Time to finish what we started." Matt grabbed his rifle and pushed Emma toward the mine entrance. "Get Daniel into the tunnel. Go deep and don't come out until I call for you." Emma's face was pale but determined. "How many?" "3, maybe 4. Matt checked his ammunition. 12 shots left. Charlie's got the high ground, but he's impatient. That might work in our favor. Sheriff Patterson crawled over to Matt's position, his own rifle ready. "I count 3 muzzle flashes from different positions. They've got us surrounded." "Not yet, they don't." Matt pointed toward a narrow ravine that cut behind the mine buildings. "That gulch leads to the old smelter. If we can reach it, we might be able to circle around behind them." Another shot rang out, this one closer, splintering wood from the building above their heads. Daniel's cry of fear echoed from inside the mine tunnel, quickly muffled by Emma's soothing voice. "Mrs. Cain," Charlie called out mockingly, "bring that boy out here. No harm will come to you if you cooperate." Matt's jaw clenched. Lying snake. Charlie never kept a promise in his life. Patterson studied the terrain with a lawman's eye for tactical advantages. "What's your history with this Brennan character?" "We rode together for 2 years. I know how he thinks, how he fights." Matt's voice was grim. "Charlie's smart, and he's ruthless. But he's also greedy. He wants me alive, because dead men can't tell him where gold is hidden. But there is no gold." Charlie doesn't know that. Neither does Hendrix. Matt made his decision. "Sheriff, I need you to keep them busy from here. Make noise, waste their ammunition. I'm going around. That's suicide." 1 man against 3? "One man who knows their leader's weaknesses." Matt clasped Patterson's shoulder. "Give me 10 minutes. Then lay down covering fire toward that ridge where Charlie's hiding." Before Patterson could argue, Matt was moving, staying low as he worked his way toward the ravine. The rocky ground was treacherous, loose stones threatening to give away his position with every step. Behind him, he could hear Patterson deliberately making noise, shifting position, even calling out challenges to draw the attacker's attention. Good man, Matt thought. Not many lawmen would risk their lives for people they barely knew. The ravine was deeper than it looked from above, carved by years of mountain runoff into a narrow channel barely wide enough for a man to move through. Matt made his way carefully along its length, his rifle ready, listening for any sound that might indicate an ambush. Halfway to the smelter ruins, he heard voices above him, 2 men talking in low tones about positioning and firing angles. The Sullivan brothers, if he had to guess. Charlie would have sent them to flank Patterson's position, while he kept the sheriff pinned down with long-range shots. Matt climbed carefully up the ravine's rocky wall, using handholds carved by erosion and the roots of stunted pine trees. When he reached the top, he could see both Sullivan brothers crouched behind boulders, their attention focused on the mine buildings below. The older Sullivan brother, Tom, Matt remembered, was reloading his rifle, cursing under his breath about missing easy shots. His younger brother, Jake, was scanning the terrain through a spyglass, looking for better vantage points. Matt had a clear shot at both of them, but he hesitated. These men were trying to kill him and his family, but they were also just hired guns following orders. Killing them would solve the immediate problem but create new ones, more bounty hunters, more manhunts, more innocent people caught in the crossfire. Instead, Matt picked up a fist-sized rock and hurled it into the brush 20 feet to their left. Both brothers spun toward the sound, their rifles raised. "Jake, you see anything?" Tom whispered. "Could be an animal," Jake replied, but his voice was uncertain. Matt threw another rock, this time to their right. As both men turned to investigate, he stepped out from behind his cover. "Drop the rifles, boys." Both Sullivan brothers froze, recognizing the voice that had haunted their nightmares for 3 days. "Easy, Matt," Tom said carefully. "We're just doing a job here. Nothing personal. Personal or not, you're threatening my family. That's where I draw the line." Matt's rifle never wavered. "I said drop them." The rifles hit the ground with metallic clangs that echoed off the canyon walls. Below them, the gunfire from Charlie's position stopped abruptly as he realized something had changed. "Tom, Jake, report." Charlie's voice carried a note of concern. Matt smiled grimly. "Tell him you're taking a little break, Tom." "We're fine," Tom called back, though sweat was beading on his forehead. "Just repositioning." "Good. Now both of you start walking down that trail toward the main road. Keep walking until you reach Sweetwater Station. Then keep going. I don't want to see your faces in this territory again." "Matt, you don't understand," Jake said desperately. "Marcus Hendricks is paying us more money than we've ever seen. If we don't bring you back, then you'll have to find another line of work." Matt stepped closer, his voice deadly quiet. "Because if I see either of you again, anywhere near my family, I won't be so generous next time." The Sullivan brothers looked at each other, weighed their options, and began walking. Matt watched them until they disappeared around a bend in the trail, then turned his attention to Charlie Brennan's position. The real fight was just beginning. Charlie had chosen his spot well, a natural fortress of boulders and twisted pine trees that commanded a clear view of the entire mining camp. But Matt knew Charlie's weakness. The man was a show-off who couldn't resist dramatic gestures and elaborate plans. "Charlie," Matt called out, "just you and me now. Why don't you come down here and finish this face-to-face?" Charlie's laughter echoed across the rocks. "Nice try, Matt, but I like the view from up here. Scared to face me on even ground?" "Cautious. There's a difference." Charlie's voice was closer. Now he was moving, probably trying to get a better angle. "Tell you what, though. Send the woman and boy down to the road, and I'll make this quick and clean." Matt felt rage building in his chest like steam in a boiler. "Not happening, Charlie. Then they'll have to watch you die. Their choice." The standoff continued for another 10 minutes, with Charlie taking occasional shots to keep Matt and Patterson pinned down. But Matt could sense his old partner's growing frustration. Charlie was used to quick solutions, overwhelming force, intimidation that made his targets surrender without a real fight. Finally, Matt heard what he'd been waiting for, the sound of boots on loose rock as Charlie abandoned his high position to move closer. The man's patience had finally run out. Matt signaled to Patterson, then began moving toward the sound, using every piece of cover the rugged terrain provided. This was going to end the way it had started 3 years ago in Nevada, with one of them walking away and the other staying behind forever. The difference was, this time Matt had something worth fighting for. The confrontation between Matt and Charlie happened in the shadow of an old mining derrick, its wooden frame silhouetted against the afternoon sky, like the skeleton of some prehistoric beast. Emma watched from the mine entrance, her heart pounding as the two men faced each other across 30 feet of rocky ground. 3 years, Matt, Charlie said, his gun drawn but not yet aimed. 3 years I've been looking for you. And now you found me. Matt's own weapon remained holstered, his hands relaxed at his sides. Question is, what are you planning to do about it? Emma could see Sheriff Patterson moving carefully along the ridge above them, positioning himself for a clear shot if needed. But she sensed that this was something Matt needed to finish himself a reckoning that had been building since that failed robbery in Nevada. Marcus Hendricks is offering more money than either of us ever dreamed of, Charlie continued. Enough to buy land, cattle, maybe even go legitimate. All I have to do is bring you back to him. Alive? I'm guessing? Charlie's grin was cold as winter wind. Alive would be preferable, but Marcus didn't specify. Daniel appeared beside Emma in the mine entrance, his young face serious as he watched his Uncle Matt facing the bad man. Is Papa going to be okay? He whispered. Emma pulled her son closer, her throat tight with emotion. When had Daniel started calling Matt Papa? When had this dangerous stranger become the center of their small family's world? "Your papa's going to be fine," she said, with more confidence than she felt. Down in the clearing, Matt was studying Charlie with the careful attention of a man reading sign on a difficult trail. "You know there's no gold, don't you, Charlie? There never was. That's what you keep saying." But Marcus seems pretty convinced otherwise. Marcus is wrong. The whole Nevada job was a setup from the beginning. Robert Hendricks was planning to betray us all for the reward money. Charlie's smile faltered slightly. "That's a hell of a story, Matt." "It's the truth. Robert needed money, and he figured turning in a gang of train robbers would get him back in his brother's good graces." Matt took a step closer. "The payroll train was empty, Charlie. Nothing but guards and rocks. We were played for fools." Emma could see uncertainty creeping into Charlie's expression. This wasn't the conversation he'd expected to have. He'd come here expecting to face a desperate outlaw hoarding stolen treasure, not a man calmly explaining a 3-year-old misunderstanding. "Even if that's true," Charlie said slowly, "Marcus won't believe it. He's too invested in his version of the story." "Then that's his problem, not mine." Matt's voice was steady, reasonable. "Walk away, Charlie. Take your horse and ride out of here. This doesn't have to end with one of us dead." "Can't do that, Matt. Too much money on the table." "Money you'll never see. Because even if you kill me, even if you drag my body back to Marcus Hendricks, he'll never believe there was no gold. He'll keep hunting, keep hiring men like you, chasing a treasure that exists only in his imagination." Charlie's hand tightened on his gun. "Maybe, but I'll be rich enough not to care." The shot, when it came, was shockingly loud in the confined space between the canyon walls. Emma screamed, certain she was about to watch Matt fall, but it was Charlie who stumbled backward, clutching his shoulder as his gun spun away across the rocky ground. Sheriff Patterson stood on the ridge above them, his rifle smoking. "That's enough talking," he called down. "Charlie Brennan, you're under arrest for attempted murder, terrorizing innocent citizens, and conspiracy to commit fraud." Charlie looked up at the sheriff, then at Matt, then at his gun lying useless in the dirt. His face went through a series of expressions: surprise, anger, calculation, and finally a kind of bitter acceptance. "This isn't over," he said, pressing his good hand against his wounded shoulder. "Yes, it is." Matt walked over and picked up Charlie's gun, checking the cylinder before tucking it into his belt. "It's been over for 3 years. We were just too stubborn to admit it." As Sheriff Patterson climbed down from the ridge to take Charlie into custody, Emma emerged from the mine with Daniel close beside her. The boy ran to Matt, who caught him up in a fierce hug. "Is the bad man going away now, Papa?" Daniel asked. "Yes, son. The bad man is going away." Emma joined them, and for a moment the 3 of them stood together in the afternoon sunlight. A family forged by crisis and held together by something stronger than blood. "What happens now?" Emma asked quietly. Matt looked around at the abandoned mining camp, at the rocky peaks rising all around them, at the endless Wyoming sky stretched overhead. For 3 years he'd been running from this moment, dreading the day when his past would catch up with him and destroy everything he tried to build. Instead, facing that past had freed him. The truth about Nevada, about the non-existent gold, about Robert Hendricks's betrayal, all of it was finally in the open. Marcus Hendricks could hire 100 bounty hunters, but he couldn't change facts. "Now we go home," Matt said simply. "The farm's burned out," Emma reminded him. "Then we rebuild it. Together." Sheriff Patterson approached with Charlie in custody, the wounded man's hands bound behind his back. "What about Marcus Hendricks?" Patterson asked. "He's still out there, still convinced you've got his money." Matt considered this. Marcus Hendricks was a dangerous man with powerful connections, but he was also a businessman. When presented with proof that his 3-year obsession was based on false information, he might be willing to cut his losses and move on to more profitable ventures. "I'll talk to him," Matt decided. "Face to face, man to man. Tell him the whole story and let him decide what he wants to believe. That's risky, Patterson warned. Men like Hendricks don't like being proven wrong. Maybe not, but he's not going to stop hunting us until he hears the truth from someone he respects. And right now, I'm the only person alive who knows what really happened in Nevada. As they prepared to leave the mining camp, Emma walked beside Matt, her hand finding his naturally. Are you sure about this? About staying? About rebuilding? Matt stopped walking and turned to face her fully. The afternoon light caught the gold highlights in her red hair, and he thought about how much his life had changed since that first day when he'd ridden into her farmyard, carrying nothing but guilt and a sense of duty. Emma, he said softly, I've spent my whole adult life running towards something I couldn't name. Turns out I wasn't running toward anything. I was running home, to you and Daniel, to a place where I belong. She smiled, and it was like watching the sun break through storm clouds. Even if home is just a burned-out farm in the middle of nowhere, especially then, because it's our burned-out farm in the middle of nowhere. As they rode back toward Sweetwater Station, Matt and Emma on horseback, Daniel riding double with Sheriff Patterson, and Charlie Brennan, secured, on a lead horse, the setting sun painted the Wyoming landscape in shades of gold and crimson. Behind them, the abandoned mining camp settled back into silence. Its brief moment of violence already becoming just another story the mountains would keep to themselves. Ahead lay uncertainty, challenges, the hard work of rebuilding both a farm and a life. But for the first time since he'd received that letter about his brother's death, Matt Cain felt like he was exactly where he belonged. Home wasn't a place on a map. It was wherever the people you loved were willing to stand beside you, no matter what storms might come.